All right, we're recording. I think it was seen to the speakers first. Looking good. All right, welcome to this event. I just the Boston is really happy to have all of you here. It's working really in the last few months. And I'm really happy to be all praising everybody most of us here. Just a few items to just start after the repeat, but as a slide after the local things. If you don't know us, we're I guess the USA was the United States affiliate as the International Policymaker Association. We are a non-profit professional society, so we appreciate all the involvement in this as trying to become one of our events. We hope people get more involved. There are a lot of ways to be involved in this stuff. What we do, we're dedicated to the use of social performance related. So any field is involved in trying to predict how buildings or the built environment will be changed before we design a building or after we design a building. Our members, you teach our members how to be experts in this area. We do have a few events coming up, so if you want to get involved more, take a picture of the slides. These links on there. Simville is our major conference that's coming up in May in Minneapolis. I hope we get to see you there. The call for presentations is out right now, so if you want to sessions or for other sessions, visit this website and the hospital has been involved in using content. We also have an event that is taking place together with the Ashbury Winners Conference in Las Vegas. If you are going with these at Ashbury, come join our semi-annual with a focus on data center. That's usually at first thinking about that stuff. It happens at the same time as these consulting sections. It is getting more fun as well. If you want to get involved, a couple of next things to know, become a member. If I just figure out US/films and sponsor, if you want to bring the whole company into the family, and I just figured out US/sponsor. We welcome any sponsor engagement. If no sponsor amount is too small, but I guess also no sponsor knows who you are. So tonight, we have Paul Ormond here to talk to us about the Massachusetts Energy Code. I'm really looking forward to this presentation. I met Paul a few months ago, so he's an amazing speaker and it's very engaging. It's great. We'll have time after that just to go around, keep your mind, ask questions. This is meant to get everyone talking together. I think that's really important. And there's plenty of food, so if you need to go back into the kitchen and get a little bit more anytime, that's just fine. I want to thank Eric, which happens to be my company, for hosting us tonight. You know, if you're looking for restrooms, they are out past the glass doors. The women's room is to the right before the elevators. The men's room is to the right after the elevators. There are all gender restrooms past the kitchen and behind the continent. We also have some sponsors tonight. We're really indebted to for providing the food that is here tonight. Eric provided the drink. These sponsors, PS and IES, provided the pizza and salad and the dessert coming. So big thanks to them. I want to give a moment to recognize them. Ms. Handy, you want to say a word about this?
Yes. As you know, this is organizations from those like candidates and using high school family students and not to mention enough technologies and then this and we also focus on energy efficiency, durability, and things influence and resilience between some of the projects to optimize the performance. You should check out our website, basically having a good case we talked about concept today.
All right, thank you. And we have, Ollie from IES, so, if you want to advance together some of you can just come back.
Hello everyone, my name is Balanos and this is the yes. And I'm happy to get those files and yeah, this these overviews. Some features that ideas is about the lines, the selection this. So what's the ideas, audience meetings was starters that was physics based tools and able to use load calculation, energy modeling, to do archiving, and also is able to do quick performance, calculated performance, right? This fourth is let's say the action, was line-based sensation after understand piece, was the longevity of making sure that if there's music, not for those larger result. Also, it's also the first factor that is one, the same is helpful, is used as first thing is, one thing is to provide the baseline model from this. It's just these features that are going to such as one package design feature and demonstration and studies. So, package design feature, the program is able to use evaluation of package design feature, including package for everything, daylight service for Windows, contains air functions and history time. This can be done in the project, you just have an idea of the value of different package design features. Another feature of the software is thermal vision calculation. It's able to find calculate the clear field thermal vision is able to find the U value if you have thermal vision with fantastic materials, because like metal framing or insulation. Okay, and finally, using the like either gauge or current hardnesses. And it finds the E value, which was also the lowest of the program because the most E value for this lab. Now, a new feature of the software that has been is a new release with thermal grading for non-depictions. Cost meaning that if you have thermal grading due to geometry, like in the corner or in the edges, and we find the usually thermal bridges, either 5 meters, the program is able to do that times 5. So all the thermal grading results can be shown in at the room level or surface level. It's hourly and downward, so this is very easy to verify the controls if we want to figure out these let's say schools officials or any other surfaces that we could review before the document. Also, it's programs also calculate previous parameters, previous on the previous reports, message signal limiting, or something using defined quantum value, such as software capable just the user these things that the children envelope, I mean, Massachusetts is substituting more and more buildings under the buildings connected, and Katie is supported parameters, and the third one is with the values so that these parameters can be indications of design quality of future student development. Any suggestions?
And I just learned that we have a Boston office for IEF, which is down home. We're really happy to have you in that down. Thank you very much. Before I ask you all, I just want to take a minute to recognize that I get working with the Boston wasn't just going to room with us. So if you don't know me already, my name is Stephen Families and questions that you will say. We also host Ellen May and history employment. Who are both working for quite some time now. We've really valued having very and solutions. And also I just Boston our chair. She days I share various thank you guys for all the work you've been doing in Artemis. Paul, you can do this for a long. Have a take it from here. Start.
Yeah, if you'd like me to get started. Yeah, thank you so much. We can skip this slide here. There we go. Thank you everyone for the chance to be here. Alan, it's terrific to meet you, and we had a great chance to catch up at Facades, and I see a lot of old friends and new friends. So it's the reason why I love doing this work is just all the friends and everyone working together to advance important things we need to do. So thank you. I appreciate your taking your evening to do this. So for those that don't know the organization I'm with the Department of Energy Resources. We call ourselves a DOER at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And one of our missions, everything that we do in Massachusetts, if you're a state agency, it's mandated by legislation. So we have a legislative mandate to reduce the carbon emissions of buildings via the Global Warming Solutions Act, which first went into place in 2008, and there's been a whole bunch of updates to that. So our department has that mandate for buildings. And we exercise that mandate through improving building energy codes, and that's why we're here today. I titled the deck here Massachusetts Thermal Code because I wanted to express that what we do in Massachusetts is actually fairly unique and different than I think the rest of the country. And so what I'd like to do is I have about 20 minutes to just present some illustrations of why we do what we do. And I think it will hopefully inspire you to put up with all of our TEDdy stuff and realize why that's so important. And there's so much we can do to improve our code. So I wanted you to hear why we're doing what we're doing. And we'll talk a little bit of how we're doing it, but then that's a segue, then I'll stop talking and I just get all of your expertise and inputs for how we can make our code work better. And once you know why we're trying to do what we do, I think you'll ask even better questions based on your experience. Okay. So one of the things that I always like to bring things back to is, what do we want our code to do? What do we want our buildings to achieve other than energy efficiency, right? We know that we want to keep reducing energy little by little each cycle, that kind of thing. But in addition to that, what are our other objectives? And I always break it down to 4 things. Comfort is obvious, but also we should build our buildings so we have as simple HVAC systems as possible. And they're small and as uncomplicated as possible, because those are the moving parts that break. So it's better to spend our money on things that don't move instead of money on things that do move, right? Resilience is critically important because there may come a day where we lose power for days or weeks at a time. So we want to build our buildings today to have a high level of resilience ability in summer and winter. And the last one, though, is very, very important. It's a big reason why we do what we do, which is what we call grid friendliness. So that means that it allows us to swap from gas or fossil fuel space heating to electric space heating without creating a new peak load in the winter. And it can be done. And when we do this and we get this done, we will save tens of billions of dollars of avoided grid costs. So it's hugely important. So when you're designing your Z-GERT on your envelope, you're actually contributing to decarbonization and our future grid. The envelopes you make are our grid. It's an extension of our power grid in Massachusetts. So how do we get there? Okay, we deploy the 4 pillars strategy, and this together is what we call our thermal code. So it's envelope U value, low air infiltration, ventilation energy recovery, thermal bridge mitigation. Those are the 4 pillars that are baked into our code. So we do have to amend the model codes that we use as our starting points. So we use IECC ASHRAE as our starting point. And the reason we have to amend them is because, except for air leakage now, the model code doesn't do well on the 4 pillars. It does really 1 pillar. We need 4. So we have to fill that gap. So in short explanations, all stuff you know, it's important to put a stop to any sort of too much trading off. So our Massachusetts code has a backstop to it. Oops. I think it has to be refreshed.
That was me, sorry.
Sorry about that. That was my bad.
Okay, back set up because it just has to reconnect to that now.
Oh, there you go. Great. Okay, so I'll try to interact or something more.
Yeah, it's showing the entire screen instead of the
That's okay on this screen because I can see, as long as it's on the big screen, fine.
right. There we go.
Okay, thank you so much. So air leakage, I think, is pretty well covered in code these days as of IECC 2021. I think ASHRAE 2019. So that's a good win. Ventilation recovery is still pretty low expectations. So I think that can be much better. We should have basically universal ventilation and recovery. Like that really is something that we should be striving for and not just once in a while. And the thermal bridge mitigation is interesting. I think this is one of the most important things we can do. And it is good that IECC ASHRAE have made some progress on this in the latest go around. But I call it like 0 to 1 progress versus a much more comprehensive that we have in our code. So that's critically important. Okay. So for those that may be unfamiliar with our code system here in Massachusetts, we have one code and each city and town can choose a layer and they build on each other. Base, stretch, and specialized are the 3 layers. So each city and town can choose to be in one of these 3 layers. Now, what's terrific though, a lot of attention's paid to specialized as if that's like some sort of like high standard. But in fact, the stretch and the specialized both have the 4 pillars equally. So the 4 pillars that we need to really do good things is in both stretch level and specialized level. So we're always getting that as long as we're not base, right? And because of our amazing Green Communities team, 92% of the entire population in Massachusetts is on stretch or specialized. So there's really, base is almost irrelevant in Massachusetts now. So I think we can safely say that we're almost close to universal thermal code with the 4 pillars in Massachusetts. And that is, I think, totally unique from anywhere else in the US, which is terrific. Now, the specialized is accelerating at a pace that we did not expect. And so I think that is a testament to all the good work by consultants and designers and advocates that have really shown that there's so much benefits to Passive House That's where this passive house is mandatory, is in our specialized level. Okay, so I just want to kind of compare and contrast. And I was not a modeler growing up, but I experienced modeling a lot in design teams. So I come from an era when what I'm about to explain was very common. And it may still be common in other parts of the country. And hopefully this is maybe illustrate why we need thermal codes so badly. But if the only framework you have is to reduce total energy use to total EUI, then at best, that is neutral or maybe not helpful to achieve thermal performance. And at worst, it could actually make things worse, right? And so if you look under the hood, if you achieve, a 10% reduction of your total EUI, you can do that without doing anything to improve the thermal performance of a building. So you could, in fact, have a 10% EUI reduction. Everyone seems to think that's, superior or great, or maybe 20% reduction. That's everyone's like high-fiving each other. But in fact, no progress made. If you look under the hood and look at the heating EUI, part of the total EUI, it might in fact be the same. And this is a situation that really used to aggravate me, is that sometimes you see this, where you could have a reduction in overall EUI, but an increase in your heating EUI. So you actually made thermal performance worse. And that was not an uncommon thing to happen, because one strategy that was used for a long time is to improve lighting and other uses like that, and then in exchange for envelope performance. And so this is one of the reasons why when we do modeling, and then when this is kind of going on in the background, we're making the thermal performance worse. But then in addition, we don't count any thermal bridges. We just pretended that doesn't exist. And then we have air leakage. And so it's no surprise that buildings don't perform the way they're modeled, right? So all these things can be addressed. Let's go back to those 4 things that we want to achieve: comfort, simplified HVAC, resilience, good friendly splash. So if we address the thermal performance, especially the heating performance, we can really win on all 4 of these things, in addition to energy efficiencies. And when we win all these things, especially the last one, which is the grid-friendly electric heating slot, that's when we reduce carbon as buildings and fuels that. So I just want to put one picture up from a big study that you may be familiar with. For the folks that practice in Massachusetts, you probably seen study. There's a link there for those that this might be new to. I hesitated putting a lot of this in today because I wanted this to be, 20 minutes and then we can have a big conversations. But I wanted to put this one slide up just to illustrate maybe one of the key points. And so there's a lot going on in the slides. So I just want to point out this one element of this. So if you look at the red bar graph on the far left, that's titled Stress Code 10% above 90.1 2013. That is the old Massachusetts stress code that our current stress code replaced. And so that is the heating end use of a school built for the old stress code. So that number would be about 5.5 AECs per square foot per year. And then the second red bar is a stress code 20%. That's a picture of kind of like the goats of Christmas could have been, because there was a movement to say hey, if we want to make more progress on this next post cycle, the way we'll do it is by increasing the percent better from the mass. So right now we have 10% better, let's go to 20% better. And so we painted that picture here. And so that bar was reduced a good amount. It went from 5.5 to 2.5 or so. So that's good. But inspired by Passive House, and looking at the thermal flow strategy, we came up with a third model where we deployed low air infiltrations, ventilation recovery, et cetera, and deployed that in a serious way. And that's what we call optimized, the gas and electric. So just looking at that third one. we can get that EUI switched down to less than 1 kVc per year. So that starts to be like almost negligible heating. So that's when really good stuff opens up to you. When you get your heating EUI down to be these kind of very, very small levels, that's when you have grid-friendly electrification. It kind of like opens the door to all these benefits of comfort, HVAC, simplicity, et cetera. And that's a strategy that we didn't invent the strategies. We stole this from Passive House. And we saw the success that Passive House had. We went and visited Passive House and experienced how comfortable they were, how resilient they were. Passive houses that were monitored for energy use, they met what the energy said, right? So we're like, let's do that. And so instead of using like a percent better, 10, 20%, we decided to go with the 4 pillars. So our amendments explicitly add the 4 pillars that you're familiar with. And it also added the TEDdy as a performance version of the 4 pillars. And that's where that comes from. That's where that comes from. That's why we do it. So once we get to that 1 kVcu, oh, one last thing I'm going to say on this sub-EUI thing. The total EUI of a school might be 30, 40, 50, something like that. And so saving a few EUI of the heating when you look at the total, if your vision is like you're trying to reduce the total, it doesn't seem like a big win. It's like, really? I went from 50 to 45? I'm not going to like spend a lot of money on envelopes for that. So it's not just like even the perceptions, the metric will give you the wrong perception of success, right? But if the goal is instead of EUI reductions, energy efficiency only, if the goal is comfort, good funding, et cetera, the EUI that we use, which one matters? So if we reduce the heating one, and we get that from 5.5 plus 1, that is huge goal. So it's kind of disguise what to do, disguise the values. So when we look at the heating part of the EUI, we find value. That's why we're doing this as well. So it allows us to have much better emissions. When we swap from gas space heating, fossil fuel space heating to electric space heating, we avoid locking in fossil fuel emissions forever. And we're tapping into an electric grid that is getting cleaner every year. So by 2050, a building that we built today, if we build a building today, we already have an emissions ban. It's legal all electric, but in 2050, the emissions ban is a home run. So that's why we want to be all electric today. But grid friendliness is critical, right? And this is what's happening all around the country. Everyone is taking IECC, ASHRAE, as they are now, with no accounting for thermal bridges in a serious way, and not a lot of ventilation recovery and lots of trading off. And then they're swapping from gas to electric. And what happens is what you go from when you go from gas model code, if you see on the left, you go to that second pair model code electric heating, and you create a huge new peak load on the grid. That will happen. So those states that are now running out and upgrading their grid to enable electrification, they're not wrong. That's what you have to do. But that's just one of the choices you take. So choice 1 is to continue to build without thermal code and upgrade your grid. That's one choice. That's an expensive choice. The other choice is to build a thermal code and not have to upgrade it. That's the choice, not piece of it. And then along the way, you have better, smaller basically systems. That's much. Okay. So the comfort and HVAC simplification, I think, is one of these things that we leave a lot on the table when it comes to the value of this, to our clients, to our building owners, staff. When you experience a low TEDdy building, a thermal code built building, a passive house building, it is like nothing else. Have you all been in a passive house? I think so, right? So you can sit next to the window, all that space is usable right up to the edge of the wall. One thing you'll notice in still is no perimeter heating. The HVAC system in this is a 2,000 square foot condo. And there's a single register for heating and cooling in the center of the unit. That's it. It's a little, you know, 1-to-1 sense. One condenser, one tunnel management set. That's it. There's no perimeter radiation going on. There's no dust and stuff. There's ventilation going on. All these, as that's it. So all those things make the HVAC system cost less. So we are investing in windows and things, but those are the things that we like. Love good windows, right? Who the heck wants HVAC system? I never heard of someone say that. I love the HVAC system. Windows, you can put in whatever you want. I've never heard that. People love great windows. HVAC systems, let's have less of those, and that can console as well. What we think is great. That's a good thing. So those are two really terrific outcomes of low petty passive house. It's very cost effective. This is from that same study. So the net first cost of building to thermal codes compared to the stretch codes we used to have is anywhere from -4 to add 4% more to build the building. Cost of building. How can it be negative? That's because the savings in HVAC was larger than the investment. Usually there was a small cost depending on the building site. From a life cycle cost standpoint, it's always that. Add mass save incentives to this, all of those numbers go down by almost 2%. So those are kind of in all of the wins. The resilience is unprecedented. We took a look at the worst REIT we could possibly find over the last 25 years. And we found a REIT that has extreme temperatures of -7s. And we modeled, thanks to folks like yourself, we modeled a code building, we modeled a low steady building, a thermal building. And the code building is a gray. This is a 1-week time period. Within 24 hours, it was freezing inside the building. The low steady building never dropped below 60 degrees. And there are many examples of passive house, multi-standards, et cetera, of that. The heating system just never comes up. It's just does not operate, it doesn't need to, there's no heating. Okay, so I'm almost at the end, and then we can have a nice conversation. So, you know, the old mission of energy modelers, right, might have been to how much can we fit off that envelope for fund? That we still achieve our percent better. That was your that would be your job. That's let's figure this out. I think you have a new mission. That's, you know, what level of envelope performance, air tightness, what level of how much do we need to turn the dials of those kind of things so that we achieve grid cleanliness, so that our peak heating load is not larger. And we can go to those, we can go to the clients working with the utility to say, no. Now the amount of electric service went down, even though we're electrifying, didn't go up, it went down. It's less. So that's your new role. And the same could be that for the word, you know, for the mission of achieving comfort, mission of achieving resilience, et cetera. So I think that's an exciting new mission for modelers and people that do this kind of work. And you're contributing to important things that we need to do. If you're an HVAC engineer, the old strategy might be like, get an HVAC system, lots of punch, and distribute it everywhere it needs to be distributed, all the way up to the bottoms of all the windows. We can make sure that the windows that are heat exchangers are as well. So we can heat up our windows so they don't get condensation on them. That's the old victims. Kind of a bummer to build a building like that. It's like almost like designing for failing, right? I have to I have a window that's so bad it has to be heated. What? That's kind of a weird way to approach it, right? So the new strategy is, you know, the work that can be done is making count on the envelope, Now let's figure out how much we can downsize as we see system and how much can we prevent having to distribute it everywhere. Not gonna save money. So find values. So thank you so much for all that you do. Hopefully you get a picture of what we do, why we do it, and your role is one of the critical players in decarbonizing our economy. Pretty awesome. And it's not just decarbonizing it, but decarbonizing it in a way that's affordable. Right? You don't have to build. Right now we're building 2 grid, and then we're upgrading 2 grid. It's like we don't need 2 grids, and we don't need to upgrade both of them. Right? We're going to go from upgrading 2 grids to not upgrading 1 grid. So that's worth, many across the U.S. That's worth trillions of dollars. So we'd like to see other states adopt these things. So that's all I have. I'd love to get your input on our overall strategy, or if you have questions about code, or if you have inputs from your Francis Petty, we'd love to hear about that. So I know Petty's hard to do, so let's have a conversation about that. But I guess it's just open to everyone here for those that want to participate in the discussion. Look at the questions on range. Yeah, I think so. Just SMS. And then you hear those that's up there. Is it just that? Is it just those, or they're DMs?
No, this is yours. And so those of you who are online, if you can also, and there's still, if you'd like to speak up, if we able to hear you in the room. There's one question from Scott. If anyone plans on using the embodied carbon measure in R406 or C406, these be thousands. Let's have a question. We'll do Scott.
That's great news to hear that you're taking that one on.
I think the same sense or to state that. Yeah, so 46% about they can model doesn't do that.
So they can potentially do that if they have been modeled properly. So you're allowed to use BC Hydro as a reference. So whatever's in there is trustworthy. And the design team is also allowed to model something that isn't in the BC Hydro. And it does require that you do 3D modeling if it has multiple directions of variation. The design team, they own that responsibility. So if a vendor weighs the model or results in front reviews, I think it's theoretically possible that those could be okay if they present to you a model that you also believe as the design engineer for that project, because ultimately you're the one that owns that responsibility of verifying that model is. So you can certainly use models that people have done, but it is on you to ensure that they meet your standard of professional care. Ideals, puzzle for modeling guideline, is that just nesting there? BC Hydro is a data where there's pre-calls, yeah, they pre-call like hundreds of different kinds of things, and within each thing, they also have pre-solved like variations of that. But there's gaps in BC Hydro because there's some building construction technique that we do here that sometimes you have to be
There's a little some stuff. Also,
Yes, BC Hydro used X-ray standards, yada 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 as their yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it might have been funded as well by SS.
I thought the main contributor is the community. Yes, also was.
Another reason for less than it.
About as well. If you felt those others used to be there, so here's a key difference. This policymaker say it's the data basic justice. Easy. All things run as a basic justice. In all cases, like exactly sponsors, institutions that are not you see this and you see it.
Yeah.
I mean, do not be one of these and this. Yeah. Even just the number of things.
Yeah. I would, if I was doing the work as a design engineer to use, laser also things, certain law systems, I would model that myself. I don't think that the text people, those defines are necessarily the model softwares. They might be unrepresentative pieces. So unless someone can produce modeling from beginning to end, showing three-dimensional or something of that sort, we should not trust that way. So if it's not on the BC Hydro database, something that is appropriately similar, needs to be done modeling. And we are open to there being a working group or subgroup that can be officially formed if there's interest in like filling any BC modeling external those gaps. And we have been reaching out to BC model people, BC measure people over the years, cares about to say like, if we prepared stuff, can we add it to your database? So we would be open to any sort of working that's interested in developing local, like here's local solutions that are common around here, modeling those and adding that. That's something. I'm sorry?
Yes, just for those answers.
I didn't hear you, understand.
There's no say. Most of these those the three lost less, I was used to that this is part of that. It's a small.
Yeah.
Yes, that so like this is for those for us and the source first.
A proposal?
Yeah.
No, we would, if there's interest for there to be a working group, to help us, identify staff. Like here's 10 different details that is missing from these micro database that is critical with all these details. And again, that would be helpful to us. You have that working group help us develop what those details are. And then we would hire someone to do the modeling and send to the publisher, like something like that.
So because of 3D modeling tools that people typically use, those models are probably for the cures systems and the these systems.
Yeah, what is the model name? The name escapes me, the software that's being used. So let me go take a look at step 15. Not firms. That's two-dimensional. At the end of the day, the design engineer is the one that's putting the stamp on these things. And the inspectional services departments they would not have those, they do not have the professional like experience to use your analysis and have them sort of it's not done typically that level of thing. And so they rely on just like
just like structural calculations or anything else that we do as design society. They're relying on the design teams to produce for them, and they'll be looking for those to be done. So the submission that they get should have a 3D, if they should have at least enough training to know to look for the thermal performance information for the blade draw systems. And if the BC hydro is not a representative thing, or if there isn't a model, they should do a model results. They should be verifying that they're getting that. So you as a designer should set that up for success by providing all those things.
To expand on the questions, that's in the 3D model of the Angeles. So what extent of a visual image model is used in the feminine process? As it becomes, video engineer or sign off on it. Basic profitability of the assets.
So it's the latter. So the engineer takes responsibility for it, and there is if you go to the math phase website, I should have had like resource links. I'm sorry I didn't do this. There are submission spreadsheets that should be populated. So there's one for SETI compliance. There's one for ASHRAE compliance. And you should, your submission should be done in that compliance spreadsheets. The spreadsheets are set up so that it's kind of like you can kind of cut and paste information from models. And then there's like a little post processing to aggregate things. So it's kind of a somewhat standard format. The ISB knows to look for that, and the engineer should be familiar. Relying a lot on the CEs to do the work, make sure it's valid. But the CEs and the design team needs to make sure that those are in the significance. And so those the ISBs should be asking for those. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of like, someone's leaving like a lead gold model as an ISB like remodels, like it's not a yes or no question. Like it has to be committed with the one that you have for just price, that kind of thing. To validate that the appropriate model of what's used. I know this.
I feel that some also things is agencies also the assessment and yes, is easily
Here's a CD model and taking those out and searching them. Yeah, I was totally with this.
I mean, also, what is that? Before this, before the test of I don't think it's also. It's on fighting. Given model on fact. Was good. The summer's music beyond the 5 years.
Yeah.
So these are things language. Now we find this. It's not different devices. If it's something was on the fifth, yes, different for how it's the end of the day before the thoughts of providing of it.
Yes, is the whole, this is on the first.
Yes.
Difficulty with studying because from the meeting, over the study. What this is also for. So, what is the,
Yeah.
now with some versions of language of code that's used for this.
That's great. Yeah, we're all the thermal bridge stuff is meant to harm you. To give you, to leverage you, to affect your design. Before, like, they would put the design engineers in an extremely awkward position. Because you have your PE stamp, right? And your stamp says that this wall has a certain U value. And you know that it's full of like thermal bridges. Does it have that U value? Like, what are you supposed to do? So I think the way that the code was before was putting design engineers in a very awkward position that they shouldn't have them. Sort of. So they had to either like say like the U value is actually the much lower, the much higher value, much worse value, or I'm just gonna pretend that all those thermal bridges don't exist. Like that's a choice you've had to make in the past. Now you don't have to make that choice anymore. You have your arms. And to your point, I think that the design process now should be that early in the design process, or this long before any sort of concession document, you're working out like your best picture of what you think that thermal bridge should be specified some level of thermal bridge, thermal but it's all in, so the contractor owns it, okay, so, right? And then you're getting, so you're almost like getting a set of stuff for what it's going to happen, but then you get those details. And
Yes. So, it's, yes. Yeah. 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 Okay. Happy also. What's this? Plus, it's 400 plus. Plus, with a some. Of course, the.
Yeah.
Let's call it that on that. Oof. It's, all the time.
yeah. I think that that's a great question. And it comes down to showing what value is. So I'm sorry, partly you out of cheap. And it comes down to like owner. When we lower the heating load that around the local federal, etc., you'll have a building that's more resilient. They've got to show you that. You can provide a power outage, and you don't have to get the giant backup generator that goes with that's the coding power. Because there's a perception that, you know, the power probably wants backup. So that goes away. So you just saved that owner of $1 million in a generator. Because you're demonstrating that school has tremendous confidence about the bill. But then also the comfort, you know, and then the comfort HVAC system that's still for a lot of office type projects or multi-million type projects. I think showing that there's no need to put an HVAC system register along the bottom of the window or the top of the window or wash the window. Like you're telling your owner, your place is to have a bad window and then feed it, or to have a good window and not have to ever feed it again. So I think you have to break it down into those values. And then, of course, in the code,
That's why they put it there, so you don't have to fight as hard. But it's still worth, even if it's in the code and mandatory, it's still totally worth explaining to a client the value of this. Because you're right, and then that is used to lead and such. It's gonna be like, wait a second, the last field on that bill was about the same EUI as this one. What the heck is different? And don't need to. And I don't. Yes. No. One day, so far, but very nothing. This is for envelope. It's out of like just. Yes, something for you, so, and really, it's good. It's a gift about it. It's about all the studies in front of it. It's happening about this. Yeah. I don't know if that's how, you know. And then go to the whole thing. Because I was also, it's. Also. What's the same stuff? Yeah. But to your point, this was a teddy there. We're starting your federal table. The only thing is, we don't, I don't, if it's, you know, you should be able to eat from food, you know. If you would demand the exchange of them, but if it is a problem, you'll be there. We found some things, it's, it's made, enough, in one of them. Yes, as a person. Yeah, it's easy. But it's enough from. Yes, yes, so. That's really. You know, those, yes. I think the other value point is that actually the good minimum. So there is a conversation you have to have a point of utility. You only have to have a utility, only service. And the utilities are frankly not up to date. And the sizing or service. And they have a little spreadsheet somewhere, like if we're all elected, then it's getting up over numbers. That spreadsheet's not come up. Because, we've seen many examples where people file very low, type of line on all of the data. And the pull a lot of hours for their servers, tiny, and utility requirements. People, it's like 110. Gives yes, then whatever model as well. And the reason is because it's Colorado. That's just not true. So I think as we are going forward and we say one is more and more, with more and more patient, with scrutiny and you'll see that pop up again and again. So now you have to forward. So what we do, I think, that's not enough. Yeah. 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 This. This. So.
Because this whole topic is another really prolific, like, thread, there's so much more work to do. And, these social sales and how to contribute to think about, like, how do we better communicate people that we would help out, that we have, you know, it's that, you know, the whole notion of like really output and increase, capability. And folks like yourself can really know how to speak to that conversation of that. That conversation kind of sort of not speak to $100 billion. Big also in that conversation is things like managed closing. So that's an easy intelligence system that no matter how many EVs are charging, if the job's coming out, it doesn't sum them off. It just sends less power to all the classes if they're all having to play that kind of. So if you put managed charging in and have low pay, you'll trip loads are not anything different. Yeah. Yeah. So those are one of the qualifiers. But yeah, anything you guys can do to help advance your whole people question, that's gonna help us tremendously. If there's any suggestions you have for how we think about it, talk about it, specify it, then I'm all yours. So that's big, yeah. The way the utilities work with cycle is everything's cycles. So if when they go to their next investment cycle, they'll just look back at their last cycle and you know, that becomes their starting point. So there's a new game in town with, you know, you go in to have like almost no heating town. So looking back at that, there's no longer valid. So that's conversation that's happened. You guys see sense? Yeah. Yeah, I think we're gonna keep that, there's, and the broader question, what was still going well? Everything.
But I mean, you guys have announced that it's not even on some figure as well. You know, 2025 will be our end of this year. Well, 26. Maybe next 25. Yeah. So. Anyway. Let's see what I mean, helps you. Yes, yeah, rid of. What? And that can be, yeah, I think it's. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's different. So, you know, I think anyone who's about emails, use my certain stuff is like. Is the what's the name? Yeah. And the real you just think. How do you guys mind that? Yes.
So let me just speak to where the code is going on the more there. We're not planning on making any changes to like the underlying structural framework. Like everything's gonna tee it up. So the only thing that's changing in the near future is that we are updating the underlying IEC and master standards that we referenced. So we're going through and making sure that if there's anything that we have to tweak to like make it work with what we want to do. Whatever IEC and actually have advanced since the last time we looked at it, but we like, we're keeping. So if it's in the base code, we'll just use that. Yep. And So we're going through that carefully now. We're updating our base code, which is that HTML operating, in the next few months on the phone. So we're going to update that. And then that's going to be underneath the filter stuff around. So that's what will happen. But we're not planning on, any random or the way we set up. So where we say there's queries mandatory and the content mandatory, that's allowed, all of the organizations with plans and fix that. So we are concerned that about setting values and whether we're right at it. So we are we're trying to get a large study underway to deal with random environment. And so it's possible that we should adjust the table of petty values. But that's the first you just yeah, let's not something that this would be like don't see it. You cannot share that. No. You can. You'll come to an emergency. But you know, you look at how the summer affects. We looked at both Vancouver, British Columbia, sorry, it was Toronto, the Toronto step code, and then British Columbia or Vancouver, we looked at those shows a few years ago, so if there's any updates to that or where it's active, that we definitely want to, I know if there's any knowledge for that. So I should have the penny. Yeah, so the reason for the what like having a lot of prescriptively predefined stuff is so that people can't like take studies. Like like you have actually schedules or whatever and then just the philosophy of study is we're not trying to like make a predictive model that someone will be like we're trying to estimate, and the kind of glass and electric. It's not meant for that purpose. It's meant to be like a mile to ground. It's like when you subject your building to these standard conditions, the walls, windows, clothing, when I think probably, resulting in that, and that's what I'm talking to people about. We're basically checking the thermos status. What goes on in the thermos is standard off. Might be a little bit different than that. That's okay. It's something to be stuff that the thermos data of the building or through the level of thermos that was. Yeah. But I get it because that's a big like complaint about study is I'd like to use my stuff. Yeah, in this model, and then if you just I don't know what else to say that it's time, but we're trying to create a situation where something that can be well, I think it's so there's a lot of fun. That's what it gets me. Low down the soil. Yeah, that's the kind of story. No. Okay. You are. You are. Yeah. So very fun. Is it difficult, but yeah, you're fortunate.
That's before. They three for but. Yeah. Yeah. That is. Mhm. Yeah. That's yes, yeah, so they're usually they because of members in stuff. Uh, there's stuff. Yeah. Well, it's how, yeah, it helps you study for the building job. That's they say so, you know, those all layout. So these are most of it's also how folks system. There's this, there's fun. Is 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 in an ideal world, that we sell is the their table phase 21 and having that conversation. Because at the end of the day, like maybe this is how you have the conversation, but the text is the only things you can change is form factor, gate, aperture, window view, wall view, ventilation and recovery. Yeah, it's actually very little you can turn that dial for time. And then for infiltration, that's what the small dial too, so low to the dial, you could go even lower, but it's really all about aperture, you know, by sound factor, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's it. Doesn't matter if you're using geothermal or, um, there's not even a tunnel window now. But it's also that's. So, one thing about this whole thing, I mean, in Canada, it's still allowed to be there. So for your client, what you sell is the value of an early intervention. So let's look at what we're trying to do and see if there's any way that we might adjust, you know, aperture, stage, et cetera, to advantage the project. Or to validate that the direction is going and it's correct. So that's not really intervention. And then as the project advances, then we get special hit. And that early intervention dealing steps analysis is following all those changes. So then your U values for Windows logs, those become those are must have, right? And then your design goes from there. So it took you in the driver's seat from day one to establish kind of like expectations. And then we have these large nuggets of window performance that's Rumble sites that are essential to achieve all the way to the end, all the way to that final contract with that one. Right. Well, you can blame it all on me. You can say there's a sky. Have a duck. Gonna get a dartboard, bring a dartboard in, put my face on there. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, I'm in public service, so I'm a public servant to see our carbon and so affordable, don't have those in my group.
So that's our, the structure that we have now, page number 7, 2022. So it's any size commercial building. No matter the size. And then the residential is a little bit simpler. So if in the residential sort of if 3 stories or less, from residential use, then you follow code building for tax house. And, other than uh, other than descriptively saying that there has to be balanced ventilation, and I think there might be for ventilation energy and that's a different time to like build up to clear that. It just feels like we're doing most. And I think there might be a prescriptive component where you could be a thing within plan. Yeah, there's a couple of good illustrations that sort of throughout this minute. Right now, there's a large electric summit because people are running. So it's like people are, there's a lot of lighting and stuff that's always in the background. And then on top of that, people are running circuits. And you can get a simple explanation. And then in the winter, the electric grid only experiences the lighting that's always in the background. It doesn't experience anything to do with the thermal because that's covered by the gas. So when we just put that in heating and heat pump, even heat pump, what happens is that peak load is multiple times bigger than that same peak load that the grid is experiencing. So that's why we have to trust the safety and the heavy water prevent that. Yes. There are studies that like map out like when that happened. It's pretty fascinating. You have like a whole group of engineers what look at that is that the end of that. And they're like, oh yeah, when 20, it's like 2035, everything's flipped, you know. So that's like all being planned. So when we build new buildings, the expectation is like you absolutely can't make that problem worse when you build new buildings. Because it's bad enough. You have to go back to all our existing buildings. And so those are going to be particularly like the key hard to mitigate. And there's 3 flavors, like you have existing buildings that are just changing their actual issue. So they always go the block, and then you have renovations, but the renovations aren't necessarily heavy from we have so we can work from the expectations there to feel often possible. So we're already like that's a good segue is that we are looking to do looking to build on full videos. So we'll be looking for volunteers to help out on the folks and figure out what that looks like. Yeah, that would be a starting point. But where this is like you can kind of be in like let's make this awesome mode, where you don't have to follow anything that they're doing. You get to write all of it. So what would you want a different building code to get like? And again, the mission is for cleanliness, comfort, again, like with those that what was that look like? So I think like, we want to come up with something that develop a different building approach achieve their goals of quality get them cannot touch that as an expert. So that's kind of the next point of it. Looking for power is really not really. That's the initial philosophy. That's the different philosophy. But yeah, you don't touch it. You, yeah. You talk. And I think that that's, yeah, your pipeline is like. And the problem with the way it's written right now, the whole idea of if you don't touch it, you don't have to fix it because you have to spin off a new. That is wrong on both sides, because I can think of many examples where, the interventions you could make if you weren't planning on touching it. Like, the building doesn't have ventilation and you cover it should. So if you weren't planning on doing that, you should include that. That should be pretty mandatory. And then I can think of the reverse, where like the whole idea of what would be touchable could be up to new. Well, I don't think you need to bring all the walls up for home value. That's we could maybe the windows the theater what's going to be so yeah, so I'm all in on some sort of shadow style, but yeah, we don't use that a lot. So is it, yeah. So I feel like
I feel that this can be pretty helpful. This is and also, but this that's when desires one like takes always one discussion. It's different because it's doesn't help that it's a single one. It is different. People, it's actually just it is especially so it's
yeah, so we have a statewide, I'm not an expert on this at all, but statewide building performance thing. So, yes. So Birdo is Boston, Hugo is Cambridge. Both of them have been in place for a while, that have put in place, you know, about 50 year existing building that needs to be this now. Yeah, yeah. And there's a statewide version of that as well. And I don't know if that started yet. Yeah, so I'm not experienced with that at all. But to your point, that those kind of building performance standards are coming, you can anticipate them, and we should develop a chapter 5 that makes sense for that work, right? Because we want owners who are facing these mandates, and they could be able to build a code and be like a fun to build project. So if you know that naturally, I think maybe some building codes could require predictive modeling, you know, like building performance standards that can also be able to is doing up any ways, you know, predictive codes, alternatives, they're not going to fill it up. Maybe actually based on your upgrades or your upgrades, that will move that's true. Yeah, so you know, if you go into real pain, but I will see. Yeah. I think there's a place for that for sure, and that's why I think there's a lot of different. There's 2 steps to this. One is like the first step is like, what do you want? Like under different circumstances. And the second step is how do you put in the package you put in words to make the thing that you know not be specific to follow. And that's one of those. Yes, I think so. And that's where we need really a lot of help. And
you know, you are all the ones that, not only are you experts in this kind of model and but you are also experts in the project. So you know what your clients are typically trying to do. I think it's important that chapter size have flexibility for different kinds of projects. So if someone was gonna do something with light touch, like what is that, the solution could be light touch. It should be oriented towards that. So that way people don't get scared of, you know, anything. And then if the project is more like that, then we'll call it safe. So I think it needs to be like a trial. So I see, so the way that we done that, if you, I'm not sure. Let me get. Complete. The performance centers and inevitably supplies, like, yeah, do I make myself supplies or that? Yeah, I know, that was. You know, this is interesting. Yeah. It's like, you know, all I'm just saying, no, you know, and you have. Yeah, well, from somebody. Really six. And I'm just part of it. Yeah. At least people like in the balance is not so. It's a full time. Well, the building performance standards are, those are going statewide, but those will be noticeable, so the metering then will provide the benefit for that, so someone will be, yeah, really short thought of that, of the metering home, but you'll quite. You so, think a lot of, you know, yeah, data collection. Right now. But. Yes, so, yeah. Yeah, I'm open, you know, we've had funding hold from this administration to undertake a build probably self-peer review. You know, it's like over $1 million for scope. And, multiple years, you know, that's. So we're hoping to still fund that, but our, you know, that was, that's hard. Yeah, that's it. And, just let's make sure that if you know what we need to do, and if not, that it gets easy. I don't think we must stop it, but, it's a lot of. It will miss. Yeah, yeah.
have people been, like, I guess, just putting aside for a moment, like, the actual values and, what is about, like, what is people just feeling, and, have petty change with the design process to doing thermal or these conversations. Like, that's a question I have for you, Rob. What would you like about that? Yes. That's everything I said. It's just like, thank you. So, I, yeah, yeah, you can leave a little calls. He's like, he's playing about him. Both sides of it. It's different. So that's why I was. So, so, it's- waiting about. It's just saying, I haven't spent a lot of time like in the half. But he's on with mentoring, uh, not the supply with, but my sense is that at the end of the day, the architect, that is the entity that is, there's an entity that is putting in instead of drawing piece out piece. And that entity is usually the architect. And the architect then is the one that's responsible for the public in that. The architect may then use that to a sub, and the sub then have responsibility for little piece. Even however, if there was a dispute with the city, it's still through the architect. So the city has no relationship with the architect's steps. The city only has a relationship with, it actually might be a city. I don't know. But yeah, that's interesting on the legal side, but I think it's getting back to the simple day to day, the solution is like when you're building projects, someone has to like have a conversation, but the other is so who's responsible for this? It has to be on someone's focus for these four. That is example. I think that's not solved. Oh, this looks. Can you find yourself? They would listen, yes, they know to do that. Yeah. And they'll probably still going through the project. Yeah, so the actual 2023. Yeah. And did you say you went through this? Yeah. Okay, you can do all four of us. I think that's this. That's fine. Again, just claiming. What's the guy? Yeah, well, it's there's an entity that is putting in the drawings of the kind of speed. I'm not a lawyer, so it seems to me that the chain of responsibilities for coming all of these other stuff. No, but no, but yeah. I think it's still interesting. Plus, when you yeah.
Yeah.
If we're falling for it, for example, these are good, let's see. That's what it's. Overall, something you respond to. Or it's very case where you could be overall to the police. Those it's such a thing that it's confidence. Others. And the fact is, getting a. First.
Probably a lot of examples of the field of life, people who support conflict as high objects, conflict. But I'd say back to yours, Ken, I think that there's probably some framework where the architect should be camping and or their site consultants that are hiring, they should be professional helping the design that is not just like a sort of a design, but it should be some sort of like this design. It needs to be designed right that explaining to the world and the technical stuff that's running through the details of what they've done. And then there should be a submittal by a contractor that's middle of detailed subjects and all. Now, the design team though, we've used that submittal. And there was either from the framework of what was specified in people think. And there would actually be a correspondence from that becomes part of the construction document. Yeah. So it's closed. I was hoping that would be the solution. It's more of that sort of collaborative connection than someone doing like doing things or you do it kind of fun. I couldn't do it. But I can see how that would happen. So yes, I think you're right about there is like this emerging, there's an emerging new professional, the envelope engineer. Where the scope and the path might have been, yes. Limit, you don't have to limit it, see, but it would have been like compensation, deficit level, size of it. With these featureful elements. And now we're able to just phone up one. But remember about that part of our deal. The unreal keyboard.
So you don't have to trust when it says anything. If I did everything else.
They're like, we're out of here.
You need to, you know, children.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making time to come in.
I was, email through, that's all.